My name is Serenity Ashford, and I never imagined that the woman my husband Sterling Graves intended to elevate as his equal wife would turn out to be my dearest friend from the frontier garrison. When I confronted him about this matter, he merely pushed me aside with impatience. She's nothing like you, so dull and uninspiring. Why must you be so petty about everything? But what Sterling didn't understand was that if Frost ever discovered his plan, she would kill him. I knew this with absolute certainty. It was at that very moment that someone caught me firmly, preventing my fall. I turned to find a woman in full military armor, her bearing both martial and confident, raising an eyebrow at me. "Serenity Ashford? So this is the pile of dung you married?" Hearing that familiar voice, I instinctively looked up at that radiant face and exclaimed with delight, "Frost!" Frost Whitmore, daughter of the Grand General who commanded the distant frontier garrison, had been my closest childhood companion. After she departed with her father to that remote outpost, we maintained our friendship through letters, our affection never dimming despite the distance. Just recently, she had written to me saying, "Serenity Ashford, I'm coming home," and added with characteristic bluntness, "I happen to travel the same route back with that pile of dung you married." Pile of dung was Frost's particular term of endearment for Sterling. When she learned I had married and that my husband was none other than Sterling, the eldest grandson and heir of the prestigious Graves family, she had asked me only one question. "Did you marry him of your own free will?" It seemed that if I had answered with even a hint of reluctance, she would have ridden back from the frontier immediately to deal with him herself. It reminded me of our childhood when my stepmother's son would bully me relentlessly and Frost would pick up a stone and hurl it at his legs without hesitation. "She's under my protection, Frost Whitmore's protection," she would declare fiercely. "What gives you the right to bully her? Try it again, and I swear I'll crack your skull open." The daughter of a military family never made idle threats. My stepbrother would cry out in genuine pain, his wails piercing the air. But my stepmother, unlike her treatment of me, never dared to offend the only daughter of the Grand General of the frontier garrison. From that day forward, no one dared to bully me again. Even when Frost left the Imperial City, her parting words to me were characteristically fierce. "After I'm gone, don't let anyone push you around. If someone dares to bully you, write to me. Don't think that just because the Imperial City is thousands of miles from the frontier garrison that I can't find ways to deal with them." Years later, I discovered that her temperament remained unchanged. As I read her letter announcing her return, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She hadn't changed at all, but everything else had. My mother died when I was young, and I had lived under my stepmother's thumb ever since. I was merely a woman confined to the inner chambers of the household. How could matters of marriage possibly be mine to decide? The situation was far more complicated than that, and if I had written back saying I was unwilling, it would only have caused trouble for Frost herself. So I wiped my eyes, ground ink by candlelight, and carefully wrote back, "Frost, I married him willingly. After all, even the vast Graves estate couldn't be more difficult than living in the Ashford household. In that sense, the marriage seemed like a reasonable arrangement. How could it not be considered willing?" After I sent that letter, I received no reply for a long time. It wasn't until my wedding day that a servant from the Whitmore household in the Imperial City rushed over with both a letter and an exquisite jade pendant. The servant looked at me strangely as I accepted the jade, seeming to want to say something but hesitating. Finally, he simply said, "This is a wedding gift from our young mistress to Miss Ashford. The young mistress says that war has broken out again at the frontier. Tens of thousands of troops are involved, so she cannot spare the time to return to the Imperial City to see you married." "Frost and I don't stand on such ceremony," I replied. I barely glanced at the jade pendant before opening the letter itself. On it, in Frost's bold, sweeping calligraphy, every stroke radiating contempt for my situation, were just a few words: "A fresh flower planted in cow dung." Despite myself, I laughed through my tears. The anxiety of my impending marriage lifted somewhat. I knew she was standing up for me, though she had misjudged certain aspects of the situation. 3 years ago, Sterling hadn't even entered the bridal chamber on our wedding night. He had simply left, issuing me a warning. "You were not the wife I wished to marry, but since you have entered this household, you will serve my parents, show filial piety to your elders, and perform your duties properly." I understood that Sterling had no affection for his legitimate wife, but as the eldest grandson of a prominent family, his personal preferences held little weight in such matters. He could take concubines and keep as many women in his chambers as he wished. That was his prerogative. But the position of principal wife required someone carefully selected by his parents, a daughter from an equally distinguished family who could match his status. And I was the one they had chosen. As the eldest legitimate daughter of Ridgemont Ashford, the Minister of Revenue, with a mother from the distinguished Wang clan of Longxi, I was considered the ideal candidate. During that first year, I devoted myself to being a model daughter-in-law. I showed respect and deference to my elders and performed all my duties with meticulous care. Even when Sterling spent every night in his study rather than in our chambers, I never voiced a complaint. I continued to send him ginseng soup and delicacies without fail, acting in every way as an attentive and considerate wife should. Everyone remarked that the Graves family had acquired an excellent daughter-in-law. My mother-in-law was particularly pleased, often commenting that her initial choice had been exactly right, but Sterling remained dissatisfied. "What's so good about her?" he would say dismissively. "She's nothing but a wooden puppet, following rules mechanically without any spirit or personality." He harbored notions of the kind of wife he truly wanted, someone extraordinary, someone who could compose poetry with him and share intimate conversations. When I overheard this assessment, I quietly hid the book I had been reading under the table, looked up, and forced a slight smile. "My husband speaks truly." This response only irritated him further. He stared at me in frustration. "You can be criticized like this by others and remain completely unmoved? Serenity Ashford, do you have even a shred of spirit or temper?" His words bewildered me, and I could only stare back at him in confusion. This seemed to anger him even more. He shouted at me, "Tonight, you are not to send me ginseng soup." Then he turned and stormed off, leaving me thoroughly perplexed by the entire exchange. My personal maid, assigned to me by my mother-in-law, covered her mouth to hide her smile. "Young mistress," she said softly, "this past year you've been so devoted to the young master, sending him soup, speaking well of him, never complaining. We've all seen it. The young master may act willfully, but he's not made of stone. Even if he doesn't realize it himself, his words show that he's come to care for you. Congratulations, young mistress. Your wishes may soon come true. The old master and mistress have been hoping for a grandchild, and I suspect that happy event isn't far off now." Her congratulations terrified me so much that I dropped my book. I could never have imagined that Sterling had such peculiar preferences. Hadn't he always claimed to dislike clingy, dependent women? How had my devotion somehow won him over? That very night, in my panic, I sent 2 beautiful maids to Sterling's study. I had redeemed them both from a pleasure house, reasoning that becoming a concubine in a noble household was far better than remaining a courtesan. Naturally, they were immensely grateful to me and approached their task with enthusiasm, eager to seize this opportunity. After all, if they could win Sterling's favor, their status would rise considerably, and their future comfort and prosperity would be assured. I was quite satisfied with this arrangement. I watched them enter Sterling's study, then returned to my own quarters to write a letter to Frost. She had mentioned that winter had arrived at the frontier and the fighting had grown more brutal. Worried that she might be injured, I included a bottle of excellent healing ointment that my mother had left me along with the letter. But barely had the letter and medicine been dispatched when Sterling burst furiously through my door. Cosmetic rouge was still smeared on his face, his clothing disheveled, his teeth clenched in rage. "Serenity, Ashford! Behind him, the two maids I had sent paused when they saw me, their faces showing embarrassment and difficulty. I stared at this scene in astonishment. Sterling fixed his gaze on me with intensity. They said you ordered them to come to me? I maintained my composure as the dutiful wife of the Graves household, Sterling's virtuous spouse. Since I married into the Graves family over a year ago, I have failed to provide you with an heir. This has already provoked gossip. Naturally, Juanin dares not monopolize your attention any longer, so I sought out these two younger sisters for you. Are you displeased with them, husband? You! His eyes bulged with fury. Who dares to gossip? This is clearly because you resent that I haven't touched you this past year, so you deliberately sent these vulgar women to humiliate me. Serenity Ashford, how very good of you. He threw a spectacular tantrum, displaying all the capricious temper of the Graves family's young master. Even the household servants were shocked by the display. The maid my mother-in-law had assigned to me murmured, "The young master hasn't lost his temper like this in a very long time." Everyone could see that Sterling was genuinely enraged, and I was the target of his anger. What had seemed like a relationship on the verge of warming immediately plunged back into frigid hostility. The two maids I had sent felt terribly guilty. "It's all our fault," they apologized. "Not only did we fail to please the young master, but we've brought trouble upon the young mistress as well." I surveyed the wreckage of my chambers where Sterling had smashed objects in his fury, and I exhaled quietly, allowing myself the faintest smile. It doesn't matter. It's not your fault. One way or another, the outcome would have been the same. I could return to being a proper young mistress of the Graves household once more. Even better, this time there would be no chance of reconciliation. The very next day, Sterling received orders to join a military expedition to the frontier garrison with no definite date of return. On the day of his departure, I prepared clothing and provisions for him as if nothing had happened. He, however, refused to look at me properly, just as he had a year earlier. My parents-in-law watched this with sighs of disappointment, reproaching me with exasperation. How could you be so foolish as to send women to his chambers? Any observant person could see that over this past year he started to... I have never felt anything for her beyond duty, Sterling interrupted coldly, cutting off his parents' words as he strode past me. Mother, father, please don't speak nonsense. He mounted his horse, looking down from his elevated position. I played the fool, pretending not to understand anything. The army began to move out, and he went with them. As he passed the crowd of well-wishers, he happened to overhear several of my sisters-in-law laughing mockingly among themselves. She's supposed to be the daughter of the Ashford family, with blood from the Wang clan of Longxi, but look at her now, a whole year, and her own husband won't even touch her. Now Sterling is going off to the frontier garrison with no telling when he'll return. She might as well be a grass widow. What right does she have to continue managing the household? They had always looked down on me, and now their words were utterly unrestrained. Sterling's figure stiffened with shock. He looked at his sisters and sisters-in-law, women he had always treated with kindness, with disbelief, then turned back instinctively. I still stood there, offering him a gentle smile. I hadn't lied. The gossip was real. It had always been real. In fact, it was far more vicious than he had imagined, and I had endured such talk for the entire year since I married into the Graves family. Serenity Ashford. A flash of remorse crossed his eyes, and he seemed about to speak. He wanted to apologize. He had lost his temper the previous night and wrongly accused me. But I had already turned away, walking back into the house, and it was unclear whether I had heard him at all. He was already mounted, committed to departing with the army. There was no possibility of turning back. He would make it right when he returned, he thought. After all, Serenity was so generous and virtuous, and he could sense that over the past year she had grown to love him deeply. Similarly, after a year of her attentive care, he found himself somewhat moved by her devotion. True, she wasn't the extraordinary, vibrant woman he had always imagined for himself. But if he truly had no choice but to spend his life with someone conventional and proper, and if that person was Serenity, then he was willing to accept it. So he would apologize properly when he returned, he decided. They would live well together from then on. After all, Serenity would certainly forgive him. Throughout the past year, despite how coldly he had treated her and ignored her, despite the mockery she had endured from his sisters-in-law, she had never blamed him, had she? This thought comforted him. Sterling's absence stretched to 2 years. During that time, the Graves family occasionally received letters from him. In these letters, he inquired after his elders, expressed concern for his parents, and showed affection for his younger siblings. But he rarely mentioned me. The one time he wrote specifically to me, his message was brief. "I am fighting far from home. As the young wife of the household, you must naturally manage domestic affairs and show filial piety to my parents. As for your sisters-in-law," he paused in his writing, "they are young and don't understand things yet. If they say anything offensive, you must be tolerant. When I return, I will handle matters for you." At the end, with a touch of arrogance, he added, "Serenity Ashford, when I return, I have something important to tell you. You must wait for me." This combination of rebuke and sweet words was almost laughable. He took for granted that becoming the mistress of the Graves household was the greatest honor I could hope for, and therefore I should naturally endure everything else. But I had married simply to improve my circumstances. I fulfilled my duties and received what I was owed in return. What did his affection or protection have to do with anything? In prominent families, matters of marriage and divorce were not decided by one person alone. As for those sisters-in-law of his, they could threaten no one. They treated me as a newcomer who, having never consummated her marriage and living almost like a widow for 3 years, deserved their contempt. Behind their fans, they excluded me from their conversations. Does she really think she's something special, acting superior toward us? Look at her, 3 years and not even an egg to show for it. Whether or not I had laid an egg, as they so crudely put it, I couldn't say. But I knew one thing. I could use my authority as household manager to show them the true meaning of torment. First, I reduced their monthly allowances. Then I dismissed their personal servants. Finally, I cut their budgets for cosmetics and clothing by more than half. The several women were furious and tearful, running to complain to my mother-in-law. But didn't they realize that even if they lacked discernment, my mother-in-law certainly didn't? Over these years, I had managed affairs properly and had never caused a scene or aired family grievances publicly despite her son's cold treatment. She knew better than to bite the hand that fed her. So when they came crying to her, she simply turned a blind eye. Sterling's youngest sister was the most indignant. As she left after one such failed complaint, she hissed at me viciously, "Just you wait! When my brother returns, you'll get what's coming to you." No one paid her any mind. I casually read Sterling's letter, then burned it over a candle flame before eagerly opening another letter, this one from Frost. She wrote about training a hunting falcon at the frontier and promised that when she mastered it, she would attach a string to its leg and fly it like a kite for me when she returned. I wondered how the training was progressing. As for Sterling, what had he said? Something about waiting for him? I shook my head. I couldn't remember. But Sterling's little sister remembered very clearly. When news arrived that Sterling would be returning, she was the first to rush gleefully to my courtyard, waving a letter and laughing with malicious delight. "Serenity Ashford, you're finished! You must be wondering why my brother hasn't written to you in so long." "Has it been that long?" I asked genuinely. I hadn't noticed. My response caught her off guard. My tone had been so sincere. She faltered for a moment, then quickly recovered her confidence. "Drop the act. Did you really think you were my sister-in-law? Let me tell you something. In all my brother's recent letters, he's written about meeting a woman. He fell in love with her at first sight. He even told our parents that when he returns, he intends to marry her as an equal wife. She looked at me with gloating satisfaction, waiting for my devastation. And Serenity Ashford, here's what you didn't expect. Mother and father have already agreed. They've kept it secret, planning to present you with a fait accompli after brother returns. Though even if they had told you, what could you do? Could you possibly refuse? She waited for me to react with shock and distress. Instead, I merely frowned slightly. How could they do this? You never imagined it, did you? She raised her chin triumphantly. My brother doesn't love you at all. Once the new sister-in-law arrives and you fall out of favor, he'll probably divorce you. But my concern was entirely different. To elevate someone to equal wife status without proper matchmaking or betrothal gifts, treating the bride with such disrespect, how could they do such a thing? If you kneel and beg me now, I might be in a good enough mood to convince my brother to let you keep your position. Her words died abruptly as she processed what I had actually said. She stared at me in disbelief. What did you just say? What else was there to say? It was merely a matter of taking an equal wife. Nothing earth-shattering. Not that I could tolerate such an insult, but I didn't need to be angry yet, because the first person to explode with rage would undoubtedly be my father, that face-obsessed opportunist. Regardless of his alliance with my stepmother, I remained an Ashford daughter. If Sterling went through with this plan, it would be a resounding slap in my father's face. He would be beside himself with fury and would tear into the Graves family without hesitation. And if this situation could both infuriate my wretched father and set him at the Graves family's throats, why would I be angry? I should be delighted. It was a double blessing. I only felt sorry for whatever woman Sterling had set his sights on. Caught between two great families, she would suffer terribly. But never in my wildest imaginings did I anticipate that when Sterling returned and saw me for the first time, he would say, "Frost is a good woman. I intend to elevate her to the position of equal wife." I froze in shock. I looked up at him in disbelief. "What did you say, husband?" When Sterling spoke those words to me, guilt flickered in his eyes. But thinking of the woman he admired, and assuming that my question stemmed from petty jealousy, he frowned with displeasure. "Serenity Ashford, you have indeed served my parents loyally these past 3 years, which is meritorious. But don't push your luck. Frost is the daughter of the Grand General of the Frontier Garrison. She can ride horses and fight in battles. She's completely unlike you dull, uninteresting women. She won't threaten your authority over household management. Can't you two simply get along harmoniously?" He declared that he wanted only the two of us, Frost and me, in his life. While I had worked diligently all these years and he had developed some affection for me, I must be magnanimous and not compete with Frost. After all, Frost was the woman he truly cherished. My mind reeled with questions. Who cared about any of that? I only wanted to know, does General Whitmore know she's being made an equal wife? Good heavens, I had pitied whatever woman Sterling fancied, thinking she would suffer humiliation. But now I could only look at Sterling with sympathy, hoping he wouldn't be beaten to death. Sterling, however, remained oblivious to his impending doom. When he spoke of Frost, his eyes lit up with self-satisfied pleasure. "She doesn't know yet. It's a surprise I've prepared for her. She must have secretly admired me for a long time. Otherwise, why would she have taken the long route back to the Imperial City just to travel with me? These past months, spending time together daily, I've come to realize she's truly a spirited, carefree, bright, and bold woman, completely unlike you conventional rule-following daughters of prominent families." He grew increasingly animated, describing how Frost would often stare at him intently, and when he caught her looking, she would smile at him, albeit somewhat coolly. But that was just because Frost didn't understand feminine tenderness, he explained. After all, when he invited her to visit his home, she had agreed. What Sterling couldn't forget was a conversation they'd had while drinking, when Frost had asked him pointedly, "General Graves is already married." Are you and your esteemed wife affectionate? He had thought of me and smiled bitterly. My wife is conventional and rigid, dull beyond measure. Oh. Frost raised an eyebrow. Sterling failed to notice how her gaze had turned cold as he continued. I once thought that if I never met the woman I truly cherished, I could muddle through life with her, but... He looked at Frost with adoring eyes, his meaning clear though unspoken. I cannot bear to wrong the one I truly care for. Then, testing the waters, he asked, What about you, General Whitmore? Thunk, a wine cup landed on the table with deliberate emphasis. Frost looked up at him, her smile carrying a chill. As for people I care about, I've always been protective, if anyone dares to slight them even once. Her tone was light but piercing. I wouldn't mind twisting off that person's head. Sterling felt an inexplicable chill despite her casual tone, but dismissed it, assuming it meant Frost already valued him greatly. Throughout their journey together, he had felt they were on the verge of acknowledging their feelings for each other. Frost is shy and can't express her feelings to me directly, he told me now. That being the case, I absolutely won't disappoint her. When she arrives in a moment, don't you dare show her a sour face. He warned me sternly, clearly worried I might create an embarrassing scene or treat Frost disrespectfully. But I suddenly felt this was all a terrible misunderstanding, and I needed to explain. The daughter of the Grand General of the Frontier Garrison, how can she become someone's equal wife? Even if Frost were willing, General Whitmore would kill Sterling. She was his only daughter. Ordinarily, it would be inappropriate, Sterling acknowledged. But Frost has spent these years at the frontier, fighting on the battlefield, appearing in public. While this earned her military honors, unlike other women, her reputation has inevitably suffered. Otherwise, Frost wouldn't still be unmarried. A touch of pity entered his eyes. But I'm not a narrow-minded man. Although equal wife is the highest position I can offer Frost, I will marry her with full ceremony and proper rites. I absolutely won't wrong her. Serenity, you're so understanding. Surely you'll support me in this, won't you? His words seemed to overflow with deep feeling, but I found them laughable to the point of anger. He claimed to cherish Frost and not to be narrow-minded. Yet when all was said and done, despite his fine words, he was still only offering Frost the position of equal wife. I couldn't contain my fury, not for myself, not because Sterling's decision to take an equal wife showed how little he valued me, but for Frost. Such a magnificent woman, subjected to this insult. So I responded coldly, Impossible. What? Sterling was stunned. He had never imagined I would refuse him, especially so firmly. In his mind, I was a woman who obeyed her husband, who upheld traditional feminine virtues. Whatever he said or did, I would never get angry. But now I stared at him with cold eyes. I said, impossible. I absolutely will not allow you to bring her into this household, much less marry her as an equal wife. My icy attitude left Sterling dumbfounded. Serenity Ashford, have you lost your mind? He laughed bitterly with rage. I had thought you were virtuous and magnanimous, but it turns out that the slightest bit of favoritism from me has made you arrogant and domineering. I remained unmoved. Think whatever you wish. As long as I'm here, I will never agree. Sterling waved his hand dismissively. I don't need your permission to marry Frost. He was truly angry now, angry at my defiance, and even angrier that the first time I showed such resolve, it was to obstruct him from being with the woman he loved. His gesture was so forceful that he inadvertently pushed me as I stood not far from him. I lost my balance, stumbled backward several steps, and began to fall. Sterling's face filled with alarm, panic flashing in his eyes as he reached out. Serenity! He didn't catch me in time, but at that very moment, a hand from behind steadied me firmly. I turned to see a woman in full military armor, her bearing confident and martial, raising an eyebrow at me. Serenity Ashford? So this is the pile of dung you married? Frost! I hadn't seen Frost in 8 years. She had grown much taller, and her time fighting on horseback at the frontier had given her skin a healthy bronze tone. When she flexed her arms, I could see the firm muscles and prominent veins. As for why those veins were so prominent at this particular moment. Frost, what are you doing here? Sterling saw I was safe and breathed a sigh of relief. Looking up and seeing Frost, his face brightened with joy, a complete contrast to his guarded, condescending attitude toward me. Then Frost raised her fist and punched him squarely. Frost, why are you attacking me? Sterling cried out in shock, instinctively trying to defend himself, but Frost's movements were too swift and fierce. She gave him no opportunity to protect himself. With a sweeping kick, she sneered coldly. You're exactly who I'm hitting. Crack. I heard the sound of bone breaking. Frost was already standing over him, shielding me behind her, looking down at Sterling's shocked expression with icy precision, enunciating each word. Sterling Graves, did I not tell you that I, Frost Whitmore, am fiercely protective of those I care about? If anyone dares to slight them even once, I won't hesitate to twist off their head. His eyes widened, trying to speak, but Frost had already raised her foot, about to stomp down viciously. Frost! Her descending foot halted mid-air. The woman in armor turned her head, and the man lying on the ground both looked at me. I habitually hooked my finger around Frost's hand and gave it a gentle shake. No violence. This was the gesture I had always used to calm her down when she was angry. The only daughter of the Grand General had always had a fierce temperament. When enraged, no one could stop her. Those foolish enough to provoke her would suffer broken bones at minimum, permanent disability at worst. But what no one knew was that Frost was actually quite easy to pacify. A simple hooked finger could dissipate her anger. Sure enough, feeling my gesture, her expression softened somewhat. She lowered her foot, though she didn't look particularly happy, asking stiffly, "You're defending him?" At those words, Sterling looked at me with gratitude and a touch of guilt. Then he watched in bewilderment as I shook my head vigorously like a rattle drum. He froze. I spoke earnestly. "You've only just returned to the Imperial City. Don't make enemies and displease His Majesty. That wouldn't be good for you." Sterling was, after all, the legitimate heir of the Graves family, and he had earned military merit. If Frost injured him seriously, even though His Majesty favored the Whitmore family, it would create an awkward situation. Indeed, at my words, Frost's expression improved further. I exhaled in relief, but unfortunately, at that moment, a shrill scream rang out. I knew this was bad, but it was too late. Sterling's youngest sister, witnessing this scene, rushed forward in fury, pointing at me with a voice sharp as needles. "Serenity Ashford, how dare you be so jealous? Just because my brother wants to take an equal wife, you've hired someone to attack him. A jealous wife who harms her husband. Do you know this is grounds for the 7 outs? The Graves family can divorce you, and this accomplice you brought will never let her go. You jealous shrew, you wretched—" Before her final word landed, I squeezed my eyes shut in resignation. A scream pierced the air. Sterling's sister was sent flying by a slap. The foot that had been poised above Sterling, about to withdraw, stomped down after all. Crack! The sound was sickeningly clear. The break was thorough. The Graves household erupted in chaos, complete chaos. Their legitimate son had just returned after 2 years away, only to have 2 of his ribs broken. Their most pampered and spoiled youngest daughter had been slapped unconscious, her face swollen like a pig's head when they lifted her up. Witnessing this scene, Sterling's parents nearly fainted on the spot. The reason they didn't actually faint was because this time I didn't rush to their side to support them as I had in the past. Instead, I stood firmly beside the one who had caused all this havoc. "Daughter-in-law, what is the meaning of this?" Lord Graves demanded with patriarchal authority. Lady Graves had lost all her usual gentleness as she approached me. Your husband and sister-in-law have been beaten, and you simply stand there watching as if blind? Where has all your usual cleverness gone? And you?" She pointed at Frost with imperious disdain. "Who are you to dare harm my son? Neither properly male nor female. What kind of creature are you?" I had regained my composure. I didn't bow my head in apology or lower my eyes submissively as I always had before. Instead, I raised my hand to stop Frost from teaching Lady Graves a lesson on my behalf, stepped forward, and looked up. "Mother-in-law, this will be the last time I address you as such. Since I married into the Graves family, I have been filial to my parents-in-law, managed the household, worked diligently, and never once been negligent. Even when Sterling repeatedly cold-shouldered me and my sisters-in-law mocked me mercilessly, I never complained. Word by word, I aired all the family scandals they had always avoided discussing. Around us, neighbors were already listening with pricked ears. But I didn't stop. I knew that from this moment forward, I would never again be a daughter-in-law of the Graves family. Being a Graves daughter-in-law required virtuous devotion to one's husband and respectful deference to one's superiors. But I could no longer do that. She could criticize me all she wanted, but she had no right to disparage Frost. I had grown accustomed to endurance while living under my stepmother's authority. But Frost had guarded the frontier and earned distinguished military honors. She should never be criticized by such a corrupt old traditionalist. Lady Graves seemed to sense trouble brewing and stammered, Are you speaking ill of your husband, your sisters-in-law, and us, your elders?" She wanted me to be quiet. In elite households, if I spoke these things aloud now, the entire imperial city would know by tomorrow. Where would the Graves family's face be then? But what did that have to do with me? My voice remained steady, neither servile nor arrogant. I had thought that if I performed my duties properly, even if you didn't favor me, you would at least treat me with respect. But I never imagined that despite entering the Graves family with my reputation intact and having committed no wrong, you would conspire behind my back to elevate an equal wife. Such utter humiliation would be intolerable to any decent family's daughter. So be it. I exhaled deeply and, under everyone's disbelieving gaze, threw down a document. Since ancient times, women have been subject to the 7 grounds for divorce. If any one condition is met, the wife may be cast out. But today, Sterling Graves has proven himself insatiably greedy, recklessly ambitious, and contemptuous of proper moral order. Therefore, I, Serenity Ashford, exercise my right to divorce him. The sound of someone swallowing saliva echoed clearly in the sudden silence. You dare to divorce your husband!" Lord Graves staggered backward, his eyes bulging with fury. Since ancient times, only men divorced wives. When had women ever divorced their husbands? It was absolutely scandalous. Never in their wildest dreams had they imagined that I, someone they considered rigid and traditional, would commit such an earth-shaking act. But I had been planning this for some time. I had written this divorce decree the moment I learned Sterling intended to take an equal wife. The only question had been when to present it. What's wrong with it? How is it that your precious son can do such things, but my dear Wannon cannot? Frost spoke up confidently, her voice full of righteous satisfaction. Lord Graves was still reeling from the shock of the divorce. He muttered, "Contemptuous of moral order? When has my son ever been contemptuous of moral order? Lord Graves still doesn't know?" Frost smiled with even greater satisfaction. "Serenity is my sworn sister, and my name is Frost Whitmore." Thud! Lady Graves dropped her silk fan in shock, her eyes wide as saucers, frozen like a wooden puppet. Sterling wanting to take an equal wife. They knew about that. That the woman was called Frost Whitmore, daughter of the Grand General of the Frontier Garrison. They knew that too. Otherwise, they never would have agreed to it. True, they looked down on a woman who led troops in battle and appeared in public. But she was still the Grand General's only daughter. If he married her, and since the Whitmore family had no sons, wouldn't everything eventually belong to the Graves family? Besides, once she was brought into the household, she would obediently bear children in the women's quarters, which they could accept. That's why they had dared to keep it secret from me, planning to present me with a fait accompli alongside Sterling. They simply hadn't anticipated that Sterling's sister would tell me first, that Frost wouldn't love Sterling at all, and most shocking of all, that I was the sworn sister of the Grand General's daughter. For Sterling to attempt elevating his wife's sworn sister as an equal wife, if that wasn't contempt for moral order, what was? "Don't listen! Don't listen! Everyone inside! Close the doors, quickly!" Lady Graves shrieked like a madwoman. Such a massive scandal. If it spread, she didn't know how she could face anyone. But it was already too late. Anyone who needed to hear had heard. I took Frost's hand and walked out of the Graves estate through all the chaos, this courtyard that had been my home for 3 years. On the road, she was unusually quiet. I asked, "Why aren't you talking?" My palms were sweating. Unlike Frost, I had been raised under strict supervision my entire life. My mother taught me how to be a virtuous wife and loving mother. My father made me learn the 3 obediences and 4 virtues. Later, under my stepmother's rule, I had to be even more cautious and careful. I had never done anything improper before today, but today I had, and it was something that would shock the entire realm. I could already imagine how furious the Graves family would be when the news broke tomorrow, how my father would explode with rage. The person I was leading stopped walking, her voice somewhat awkward. "I thought you might be angry with me." "Why?" I asked, puzzled. She was half a head taller than me now and shrugged her shoulders with characteristic directness. "I came here and immediately stomped on that piece of dung you married, slapped your sister-in-law, and argued with your in-laws." I burst into laughter. "They provoked you first." Frost could never be wrong. Even if Frost truly was wrong, didn't Sterling and the Graves parents bear responsibility too? But Frost shook her head, seriously correcting me. "They provoked you." She looked at me, her eyes brightening with warmth. "Serenity, you've grown up." I blushed slightly, embarrassed, and replied modestly, "Not really. I hadn't originally been such a docile girl. I had only pretended to be so out of necessity while living in the inner household." "Then why have you stopped pretending now?" Frost asked. I looked up at the moon overhead, feeling as if the last of my shackles had finally fallen away, smiling freely. "Because I've saved enough money now, I can leave 3 years. For 3 years, free from my father's and stepmother's oppression, I had been quietly accumulating resources while living in the Graves household. I had finally saved enough to support myself independently. I had the confidence to leave and had long been prepared to do so. To hell with being a noble daughter or virtuous daughter-in-law." I waved my hand dismissively. "But tell me, how did I become General Whitmore's adopted daughter?" Frost looked pleased to see me happy. "I took the liberty of making that arrangement. If you come with me to the frontier garrison, you can kowtow to him once to make it official." Yes, to the frontier garrison. She had told me she came specifically to fetch me. Originally, she had traveled the same route as Sterling back to the Imperial City precisely to observe how he treated me. If I truly was as happy as my letters claimed, she would visit me briefly and return to the frontier. But if I had been lying about my happiness, then no matter what it took, she would take me away, whether by petitioning the Emperor or trading her military achievements. It sounded simple enough. But truly leaving, how could that ever be easy? Frost brought me to stay at the Grand General's mansion in the Imperial City. The next day, the entire capital was in uproar. Some gossiped about how the Graves family's eldest son intended to take an equal wife, none other than the famously fierce woman warrior of the Whitmore family. Others discussed how Frost Whitmore and the Graves' eldest daughter-in-law were sworn sisters, making the Graves family's behavior utterly insulting and contemptuous of moral order. But what shocked people most was that I, the Graves' eldest daughter-in-law, the minister's daughter, once renowned throughout the imperial city as a model virtuous daughter-in-law, had actually divorced Sterling in full public view and eloped with the Whitmore daughter. It was completely unprecedented and earth-shaking. For a time, the imperial city buzzed with gossip, and my minister father stormed over as the first to confront us. Normally, he wouldn't be able to enter the general's mansion, but no one stopped him. When he arrived, he found Frost and me sitting peacefully in the courtyard. She was performing sword dances for me while I peeled grapes for her. My father's eyes blazed with fury. "Unfilial daughter, what have you done?" While chaos reigned outside, Frost and I, the supposed instigators, enjoyed perfect tranquility. How could he not be furious? My stepmother followed at his side, adding fuel to the fire. "Oh, my eldest daughter, what foolish things have you done? Men naturally have multiple wives and concubines. It's perfectly normal. As the principal wife, how can you lack the magnanimity to accept others? Didn't your late mother ever teach you this? How dare you divorce your husband? Now the entire imperial city is laughing at our family." Her words only inflamed my father further. He immediately stepped forward to drag me back to Kowtow and apologize to the Graves family. "You will kneel down and explain to the Graves family that you suffered from temporary madness, that you've recovered now, and that everything you said before was the ravings of a lunatic. If not, I'll make you regret it. But could an old fool like him get anywhere near me?" The moment he reached toward me, Frost's sword swept across, leaving a shallow but bloody gash on his arm before he could dodge. My stepmother cried out in panic. "Eldest daughter, what are you doing? Are you trying to commit patricide?" She desperately tried to pile accusations on me, but I stood up and walked over to her. "Madam Ashford speaks incorrectly." A flash of triumph crossed her eyes, as if she thought I was about to submit. The next second, I slapped her twice across the face. "I'm not just committing patricide, I'm also committing matricide." She screamed and collapsed. I looked down at her coldly, sneering. "Though you hardly count as my mother anyway. You're just a stepmother. You have no right to lecture me." My father clutched his wounded arm, glaring at Frost and me with venom. "Miss Frost, does the Grand General know about your wild behavior?" Frost's sword still pointed at him, her tone equally venomous. "Ridgemont Ashford, please address me as General." She held the rank of third-grade military officer. As fellow court officials, neither outranked the other. What she chose to do required no permission from the Grand General. My father was momentarily speechless. Anger flashed in his eyes. He most despised Frost as an aberration. As a woman, instead of learning embroidery and needlework, she chose to wield weapons and fight on battlefields like a man, competing for military honors. In his view, I had obviously been corrupted by Frost's influence. But unable to do anything about Frost, he could only use paternal authority to pressure me. "Unfilial daughter, do you truly intend to defy your father? Do you want me to disown you entirely?" "Father needn't trouble himself with such formalities," I replied, unmoved. "Your daughter never planned to return anyway. You've never loved my mother or me. You don't care when the Graves family treats me poorly, when Sterling looks down on me and humiliates me. You only care whether I've satisfied the Graves family, whether I've brought you shame. Even so, Father." I looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "I'm not going back." My father's expression grew unspeakably ugly, whether from having his hypocrisy exposed or from rage at being contradicted. "Excellent. Very well. But don't forget, you are my daughter. Even in death, you belong to the Ashford family. You dare to leave your husband's house? I have the right to drag you back, or report you to the authorities, or even kill you, all without consequence. Such unfilial behavior deserves drowning." As his words fell, my stepmother stopped her sobbing in surprise, then looked pleased. Frost stared in disbelief. "Ridgemont Ashford, have you lost your mind? She's your own daughter!" Yet he wanted to drown me. An unfilial daughter must be killed to preserve the family's honor, my father declared without changing expression. Otherwise, how can the Ashford family maintain its reputation? He wasn't afraid of Frost either. All of this is permitted by our dynasty's laws. I'm merely handling family business. General Whitmore, surely you cannot interfere in this official's domestic affairs, unless you wish me to impeach you before His Majesty. You truly deserve death. Even having killed countless enemies at the frontier garrison and witnessed much depravity, Frost was shocked by his cold-blooded shamelessness. But I was different. I was already accustomed to this. If father insists on this course, then your daughter will have no choice but to present the evidence of how you've seized citizens' farmland, cultivated relationships with other officials, and accepted bribes privately. I'll give it all to Frost to deliver to His Majesty for his examination. Having prepared to break free from both the Ashford and Graves families, how could I possibly be unprepared? If we were going to tear off all pretenses, let's see who was more ruthless. As it turned out, my father couldn't go that far. He narrowed his eyes, looking at me properly for the first time as he might look at one of my brothers. "You're threatening me?" His voice was low and dangerous. "What about the Graves family then? I know you were utterly devoted to that Graves son. Are you abandoning him too?" My gaze remained calm. Father's words are strange indeed. I respect and honor whoever my husband might be. That's simply my duty as a wife. But what does that have to do with love? Who could love someone who constantly belittles you, humiliates you, and wants to make your sworn sister his equal wife? A crashing sound came from outside the gate, but no one in the courtyard paid it any attention. My father left, thoroughly frustrated, because my stepmother tried to continue fanning the flames. Eldest daughter, as a daughter, how can you be so heartless toward your father? This is truly rebellious and unnatural. I smiled coldly. Madam Ashford had better say less, or I might accidentally reveal how you've used father's influence to place your relatives in various positions, and how you secretly lost 20,000 taels at the gambling houses without telling father or your son. She froze. My father whipped around to glare at her, his eyes practically breathing fire. I suspected their journey home wouldn't be peaceful. I was quite satisfied. Turning back, I found Frost propping her chin on her hand, watching me with amusement. I touched my face. "Is there something on it?" She shook her head, the corners of her mouth turning up. "You're truly like the old Serenity again." The old Serenity. That must have been when I was 8 or 9 years old, before my father and stepmother's control became so strict. They couldn't have known that the stone Frost nearly used to break my stepbrother's leg had been picked up by me. I smiled self-deprecatingly. Was the later, timid Serenity very unlikable? Frost shook her head again. Serenity is Serenity, likable no matter what. If you didn't want to be timid, you should have fought back against those who bullied you rather than living like a coward subject to their constant criticism. The crashing sounds outside the gate resumed, but still no one paid attention. I asked Frost when we would leave for the frontier garrison. She ate the grapes I had peeled for her and glanced toward the gate. Let's wait a bit longer. We waited until 5 days later, when His Majesty held a celebratory banquet. Sterling and Frost were naturally invited, but what I hadn't expected was that I would be on the guest list as well. I was puzzled, but Frost patted my shoulder. "Since I came to fetch you, I never intended to let you leave under a cloud of scandal. Serenity, you deserve to depart with honor." On the day of the banquet, we encountered Sterling. His injuries had mostly healed, but he seemed much more dejected than before. Despite being honored as a war hero, he should have been in high spirits. But when he saw Frost, he seemed to remember his pain, and his eyes showed a hint of avoidance. Clearly, his feelings for her had completely died. It seemed that for all his talk about preferring spirited, free-spirited women, he hadn't considered that such women might actually hit people. In the end, gentle and mild-mannered women were more comforting. So he approached me instead. Serenity, I regret everything. Before, I wronged you. I didn't know you suffered so much because of me, and I had no idea that leaving you would make me so restless. You don't know. Since you left the Graves household, my sisters-in-law have been fighting constantly, quarreling before my mother every day over household management authority. Each one has created disasters. The most troublesome, my second sister-in-law, bought spoiled fish to save money. Both my parents fell ill with food poisoning and were bedridden for days, while she pocketed the money she saved. He watched my expression, and seeing that I didn't seem resistant, he thought he was making progress and continued eagerly. My youngest sister has always been undisciplined, but with you managing her, she at least maintained proper behavior in public. But after you left, with mother ill and no one to control her, she actually fought with other young ladies at a banquet. Her reputation for arrogance has spread, and the family she was supposed to marry into has called off the engagement. He grew increasingly excited, more and more convinced he had mistaken pearls for fish eyes. Serenity, I know you're angry with me, but now I understand my mistakes. I won't even hold your divorce against me. We'll call it even. Come back, and we can be like before. What do you say? You fool! What nonsense are you spouting? Frost frowned as she listened, clenching her fists, wanting to strike him. I grasped her fist and looked at Sterling calmly. No. Sterling was stunned. He had thought apologizing would make everything easy. The eldest son of the Graves family had never humbled himself before anyone like this. What more could I possibly want? But I truly was very dissatisfied. Sterling, you've told me all about how badly they're faring, but what about you? Me? Sterling was confused. I continued. You were the first to treat me poorly, the one who humiliated me, yet what consequences have you faced? Moreover, I've made enemies of the Graves family, and seeing them suffer should make me happy. But you? Why are you also using their misfortunes as bargaining chips? You are their son and brother, after all. With each sentence I spoke, his face grew paler. Sterling, you've always been selfish. Returning to how things were with you would be a nightmare for me. I took Frost's hand and walked forward. Only then did he snap out of it. No! Serenity, I can change. You can't leave. You are my wife. You belong to me. It's her, isn't it? He pointed at Frost furiously. She's led you astray because she herself defies convention. She has ulterior motives. You can't trust her. Slap! He received a hard slap across the face. From me. My gaze was ice cold. Sterling Graves, dare to speak against Frost one more time. Sterling's head snapped to the side from the force, disbelief written across his features. He happened to catch sight of Frost standing behind me, smirking with satisfaction. He gritted his teeth. You cannot leave, Serenity. I understand now. I love you. Even if I have to use underhanded methods, I won't let you go. Today at this celebratory feast, when His Majesty rewards merit, I'll petition him to grant you an official title, letting everyone know you are my wife, Sterling Graves. You'll be a general's wife with honor and glory. I stared at him as if seeing him for the first time, disgusted by his hopeless condition. You're insane. This time, I didn't stop Frost from giving him another beating. Despite his words, I sat uneasily through the celebratory banquet. Not wanting to worry Frost, I tried to comfort myself. Sterling was selfish and calculating. Having earned the opportunity for rewards and promotion, surely he wouldn't waste such a golden chance petitioning for a mere title for me. More importantly, if I were actually granted an official title, I would truly be bound to the Graves family for life. From the high platform, the Emperor's voice rang out cheerfully. The frontier campaign saw all of you distinguished in defending our borders. Now that peace reigns over rivers and seas, I naturally must reward merit. Dear ministers, speak freely, don't be modest. Those called upon naturally demurred with humble protests. Only Sterling suddenly knelt down. Your Majesty! I clenched my fist so tightly my nails dug into my palms. "Your Majesty!" An even clearer voice rang out beside me. I stared in amazement as Frost knelt down. She looked straight ahead without a trace of hesitation. "This humble servant has one wish. I would stake all my past military achievements on it, begging your Majesty's fulfillment." Her voice resonated throughout the hall. Sterling interrupted, seethed with frustration. "Frost Whitmore, what are you trying to do? Do you think you can petition for Serenity's title? She's your sworn sister, not your wife." Frost ignored him completely, repeating, "I beseech your Majesty's fulfillment." "Oh?" The Emperor raised an eyebrow, interest flickering in his eyes. The drama between the Graves, Ashford, and Whitmore families had become the talk of the imperial city. The Emperor couldn't possibly be unaware. He was quite entertained by the spectacle and had deliberately kept the Ashford and Graves families in suspense. After all, no matter how powerful the Whitmore family became, they had only one daughter. No threat of overwhelming the crown, but the Graves and Ashford families were different matters entirely. "Speak, beloved minister." "Frost!" I instinctively reached for her sleeve. But Frost had already begun. "This servant's father has only me as his daughter. In my youth, due to my unruly nature, I had no companions. It was my sworn sister Serenity who accepted me despite my flaws, protected me everywhere, and never abandoned me. Therefore, my father accepted Serenity as his adopted daughter. But all these years, my father and I have been far away at the frontier garrison, unable to provide her any protection. Meanwhile, my sworn sister married into the Graves family and endured endless torment. This is known throughout the imperial city. She has always been kind-hearted and virtuous and truly doesn't deserve such a fate. Therefore, I and my elderly father now petition your Majesty, staking all our past military achievements, asking only that your Majesty grant my sworn sister the rank of county princess, allowing her to return with me soon to the frontier garrison to fulfill filial duties at my father's side." Her words rang out clearly and powerfully, each syllable striking the heart of everyone present. Sterling was speechless. My father couldn't help but slam the table. "Her birth father is right here. What frontier garrison? What filial duties?" But Frost only smiled more coldly at his outburst. "So Ridgemont Ashford still knows he's Serenity's father? Then dare I ask where you were when Serenity endured humiliation in the Graves household?" "You!" my father choked, then said through gritted teeth, "As a legitimate wife, the 3 obediences and 4 virtues are her proper duty. Then, as an adopted daughter, fulfilling filial piety at her father's side is equally her proper duty." "You're being deliberately unreasonable." He wanted to say more, but the Emperor had no desire to hear it. The Emperor studied Frost intently. "Is this your intention, or the Grand General's intention? Just this. Nothing else?" After all, the Whitmore family had accumulated tremendous military merit. If they truly made requests, the Emperor would find them difficult to refuse. If he could write off all those achievements with a single county princess title, it would be like a windfall from heaven. Frost bowed her head. "Both my father and I share this intention." "No, your Majesty." Sterling tried to speak, but the Emperor had already joyfully struck the table. "Excellent! I grant your request. General Whitmore's paternal love moves me, and I shall fulfill his heart's desire. I hereby grant Serenity of the Ashford family the title of Princess Jeaning, with stipend and privileges, to return shortly with the Whitmore military to the frontier garrison to attend to her father and fulfill filial duties." The Emperor's word was absolute. There was no possibility of reversal. My father stood frozen in place while Sterling collapsed to the ground in defeat. Frost pulled me to my feet, and together we kowtowed. "We thank your Majesty for his gracious favor." As Frost had promised, I departed for the frontier garrison with honor and dignity. The criticisms that had followed my divorce melted away like mist before the title of Princess Jeaning. The frontier garrison was harsh, but General Whitmore and Frost were there. I performed the kowtow ceremony for General Whitmore, and the robust man laughed heartily. "Excellent, excellent! Now I have another daughter. That Ridgemont Ashford doesn't know a treasure when he sees one. Just wait until he regrets it later. I hear he's being impeached for corruption and bribery lately. Probably won't have good times ahead. And that Graves family is in complete chaos. Word is that Sterling is cleaning up his siblings' messes, abusing his position for personal gain, and has also been called to account. Truly triple blessings." He was overjoyed, then suddenly noticed the jade pendant at my waist, his eyes widening. "Isn't this the token my Whitmore family prepared for our future daughter-in-law?" He glared and bellowed, "You brat! Why are you giving things away carelessly?" Frost, who was sharpening her sword, became annoyed and shouted back equally loudly, "Old man, you only have one daughter. Do you even have a daughter-in-law to give it to? Since you'll never have a daughter-in-law in this lifetime anyway, might as well give it to Serenity. At least it looks good on her." What brutally honest reasoning. Seeing this exchange, I smiled gently, tears streaming down my cheeks. I knew they were tears of joy. Here in this remote frontier outpost, far from the scheming courts and rigid social expectations of the imperial city, I had found something I had never truly possessed before, a family that loved me unconditionally, valued me for who I was, and would fight anyone who dared to wrong me. As I watched Frost and her father's good-natured arguing, feeling the desert wind ruffle my hair and seeing the vast open sky stretching endlessly above us, I realized that for the first time in my life I was exactly where I belonged, the girl who had once been trapped between demanding in-laws and an indifferent husband, who had walked on eggshells in elegant courtyards and lived by others' expectations, was finally free. And as Frost caught my eye over her father's head and winked at me with that same mischievous grin that had gotten us both in trouble as children, I knew that this wild, difficult, beautiful place with these fierce, loyal people who had claimed me as family, this was home. I was Serenity Ashford no longer. I was Princess Jeaning of the Frontier Garrison, daughter of General Whitmore, sister to the legendary warrior Frost. And I had never been happier in my life.